Hi, welcome everyone. Hi, Remus. Nice to see you. Um, Great. Thank you for joining us. We are just admitting all the participants. In the meantime, if you'd like, you can share your location, your affiliation, your email, LinkedIn profile, or any other links that you'd like to share with us so that people can stay in touch. This is going to be a really good session. We're expecting high attendance, so please feel free to make yourself known. Just going to give everyone a couple of more minutes, make sure everyone that is in the waiting room is admitted, and then we're going to start. Okay. Happy Wednesday from Cleveland, New York. I myself am in Chicago. All right. Sharon, if you wouldn't mind, let's go to the next slide. So, just a little bit of etiquette to start. If everyone can maintain on mute, I think that would be helpful and make this session that much more enjoyable for everyone. We're going to use chat for questions and comments. What we have advised in the past is if you want to put a capital Q or the word question before your question, that helps us identify them fairly quickly. And there will be a recording that we'll send out with the slides and the resources and the chat in the future. Just by way of introduction, my name is Maggie Riyad. I am co-chair of the Program and Engagement Committee here at the Encore Network, and we're very pleased to have you all with us, whether you're a new or existing member. And our sponsor today, next slide, Sharon, please. Our sponsor today is the Del Mar Encore Fellows Initiative at the Dayton Foundation. So they have generously sponsored the event today, and this initiative harnesses the talents and expertise of older adults to aid nonprofits and move the needle on community initiatives. Please feel free to look them up, and you can learn more about what they do. Okay, next slide. I'm very pleased to have Bob Pulver with us today. Bob Pulver is a technology strategist who has spearheaded transformation and innovation across Fortune 500 companies and startups. His journey began at IBM, where his career path included digital transformation, IBM Watson, and accelerating IBM's AI transformation. Then at NBC Universal, he developed automation roadmaps and built cloud computing products and services. This is where he initiated most of his HR-related work. He was piloting modern approaches to talent transformation and optimization. He then became an independent advisor to staffing firms looking to modernize their operations, and he went on to found Elevate Your AIQ, which is an advisory practice guiding organizations to build and use AI ethically and fairly. Bob is also the host and producer of the Elevate Your AIQ podcast, which we strongly recommend you subscribe to. He has been very involved in AI, and we are so happy to have him here with us today to share his insights, and I'm going to turn it over to Bob.
Great. Thanks so much, Maggie. That was, wow. Sounds like I've done a lot, right? I've certainly seen a lot of transformation in my day through my time at IBM. And I remember when we first got actual software on our computers with Lotus at the time, which is now, defunct, but I'm sure many on the call will remember the Lotus suite of products. I think I got to IBM right before they acquired Lotus, and yeah, the rest is history. But we've certainly seen a lot of technology change over our tenures, and I want to sort of lean into all the ways in which humans and technology are interacting and deriving value, and we are continuing to augment our own capability and our own potential. So I'm going to, with that preamble, I'm going to share my slides. Let's go here. Okay, can everyone confirm you can see my slides? Good. All right, great. So what we want to talk about today is sort of level set what we're witnessing and what we're experiencing in our organizations or through whatever career path you're on right now. And I want people to recognize that as much as you see these sort of doom and gloom headlines, you're seeing job displacement, you're seeing a lot of turmoil, you're seeing AI. We'll talk about this a little bit, but sometimes AI is being used as an excuse of why cuts are being made. I want people to make sure that they are retaining their own agency and they recognize their own potential to succeed through this transformation if they're willing to learn and grow and adapt as necessary. I think a lot of us can appreciate that we've had to do that in other ways, throughout our careers at IBM. I had about 12 different jobs over my 22 years at IBM. And then even when I was at NBC Universal for 3.5 years, my title didn't change, but I moved around and did all kinds of different projects in the CIO's office, working, as Maggie alluded to, with the HR team and other lines of business and other domains. So really got a broad perspective. And so I want people to think about whether you've had a linear career or a non-linear, what I like to call a lattice kind of career. You have a lot of transferable skills. You have a lot of experience and institutional knowledge, and a lot of human attributes, what I refer to as your durable skills, to be brought to bear no matter what the technology is that's coming into our organizations. So what I want to cover today, if my slides would advance, let's see if we can get here. So I want to set the stage, and what I mean by that is there's a lot of terminology that's getting sort of jumbled, and I just want to clarify what we mean when we talk about certain topics. Even just something as simple as an agent is being sort of misconstrued and is used to mean different things. So let's just level set with some terminology. Let's talk about what I mean when we talk about human-centric AI. Is that the same as responsible AI? They are not exactly the same, spoiler alert, but there is a Venn diagram where there's clearly an intersection of those two. So we'll explore that. I want to talk about the risks and the realities. So there are plenty of risks to be aware of, and that ties to the responsible AI piece. It also ties to some of the things that we've been experiencing through, whether it's data privacy issues that we see in the consumer space or at work, and some other things that we need to look out for, as well as the realities of what's going on in the labor market and how quickly AI is advancing into organizations. There are risks, but there's also a lot of opportunities. So I want to dig into that. And then when we talk about the future of work, the cautious optimist in me likes to think about this as humans will never be completely displaced by AI. There will be new jobs that are created, and we just have to make sure that we're looking ahead, that we're thinking about where things are moving and position ourselves appropriately. And then finally, leaning into the phrase that I use for my advisory practice and my podcast, but what do I mean when we talk about AIQ, and how do we sort of embrace that, not just in the tools that we play with and the hands to keyboard skills or voice interaction that we have with the AI tools that we choose to use, but also do we have the right mindset that I was alluding to before in terms of learning and growth and adaptation. Okay. So let's first talk about what we mean when we talk about an agent. So I think 2025 was dubbed the year of the AI agent, and 2026, I believe, is the year of agentic AI. So we'll talk about these things. Many of us remember and are probably still experiencing when you go to certain websites. If it's not the most modern website, you may have a chatbot on the side of that website that's embedded in there, but you can't necessarily just ask a natural language question. Some are getting better at this and some are upgrading their capability. But we also see where, it's asking you a question, it's being friendly, but then it gives you like one of five choices that you have to pick from, right? So this goes back to chatbots of, a decade ago, where they were all sort of rules based. It understood a very structured way of sorting information. And if you didn't ask the right question in the right way, or it wasn't related to one of those topics, you were kind of dead in the water, and you immediately needed to transfer to, a human agent, if that's even available. So very rigid and structured and rules based. Then we have AI assistants. So when ChatGPT entered the public consciousness in the fall of 2022, ChatGPT was what we refer to as a modern AI assistant. So it's still it understands natural language, but it's still a back and forth. It's waiting for your input. It's going out and it's doing research for you. It's gathering information, and it's trying to understand what your intent was. And as we've seen, as you add more context to it, if you tell it, what your role is, what your intent is, what the context is, it can give you, better information. And we'll talk about whether that information is actually accurate or not as we get into the risks. But you just need to be, discerning and not immediately necessarily trust what it's telling you. So we'll get into that. When we talk about AI agents, an agent literally has some level of agency and autonomy. So it understands what you're trying to do. It understands what your goals are. It may take that and say, I need to break that task into subtasks, and it can autonomously sort of simultaneously run those subtasks together, and then it comes back together and gives you the result of all of those sort of subtasks. But it can learn from those results. It can maintain context. So now when you go into these assistants, you have a chat history, and you can pick up where you left off with each interaction, with each conversation. And an agent also allows you to build and store some like sort of short-term memory and some knowledge about you and the context with which you're engaging with it, so that you're not starting from scratch each time. But it's basically executing certain things on your behalf. So I don't know if people have started to play with, so Claude, I'm a Claude guy right now. So that's where I've been spending a lot of my time. So I use Claude Chat as my AI assistant, and I use Claude Cowork as my AI agent. I've given it access to certain desktop folders. I've given it access to my Google Calendar, so that it can basically do things autonomously on my behalf. But I'm very careful and deliberate with what data sources I allow it to go to, and I make sure that my privacy settings and everything is locked down, so that nothing that I do within the environment is available to train the main public models for Claude under the Anthropic umbrella. So those are some of the differences between old school kind of chatbots that we still experience today, an AI assistant. So that's Gemini, it's ChatGPT, it's Claude, and then AI agents gets into, if you're a Microsoft shop, you might be using certain agents within Cowork. In Google's AI Gemini, you can create your own agents called gems. And so without getting into all the gory details, I mean, those are some of the differences between the AI that you're directly interacting with. The other thing I wanted to sort of level set on is when we talk about what do we mean by different types of AI. So we're all now familiar with generative AI, which is the chat GPTs of the world that entered this public consciousness in 2022. But those of us who've been around technology for a long time, you don't have to be an AI researcher or a data scientist to know that AI capabilities go back decades, from basic machine learning and some early iterations of what artificially intelligent systems could actually do. And so I just wanted to make sure that people understood there's different types of AI. One of the things that comes up a lot when we talk about responsible AI and the talent space when we talk about AI making certain decisions, and people say, well, it shouldn't make decisions about talent because it hallucinates. And I just want people to be careful. We're sort of mixing terminology and functionality. Predictive AI is what is sort of evaluating resumes, is providing with some kind of stack rank to the hiring team, or a score of your profile against a given job description. That is all that type of matching is predictive. Anytime you're doing sales forecasting, demand forecasting, those types of things, that is using much more sort of mathematical computation and logic to predict based on historical data. This is what we predict will happen, as opposed to generative AI, which, as the name implies, is actually generating net new content based on information that you've given it, or that it researches for you. If I take just a quick step back on automation, so a lot of people say, well, we're using AI to automate things. Yeah, it's sort of AI, but I think of automation as sort of one of the precursors to real AI, or at least precursor to agentic AI, where again, going back to the old school chatbots, you're following some specific rules, at least in the case of basic automation, what we call robotic process automation, where it's literally being scripted, whether that's in Python or some more modern tools, but you're literally telling it, this is what I want you to do. These are the dots I need you to connect. These are the steps in the process that I want you to sort of execute. And yes, there is intelligent automation, but as we move and the automation becomes more intelligent, now we're sort of hitting on what's coming up in this agentic AI conversation. So agentic is basically saying we're going to not just automate a workflow, for example, but we're going to use AI agents in some cases instead of a human being, and those autonomous agents are going to actually execute these process steps, and we're going to link those things together. And so we'll talk a little bit as we go forward about what that means, but the intention is not just to create efficiency gains and allow you to scale and reduce perhaps human error and things like that, but the intent is really to move us, the human talent, to more higher value tasks. So spending more time thinking through decision making processes, making sure that we're providing the oversight and the accountability for all of the steps that we're going through, and really making sure that the human judgment, the context, the creativity, the curiosity, all of these human elements have more time to drive more value in the organization and across your stakeholder community. So that's what I wanted to sort of level set. And I don't want to go into this. This is definitely an eye chart, but this is just an example of what agentic AI looks like in the human steps within this that are involved for this basically human plus AI agentic workflow. So in most cases, you don't want to completely automate every step of every process, and there's a role for human that is not just standing there observing and waiting for something to go wrong, and having humans in a sort of react mode. There's still a lot of activities that happen in these processes where human involvement is necessary in a proactive way, not just in a reactive way. I want to just spend a couple minutes talking about responsible AI. I mentioned that responsible AI is not exactly the same as human-centric AI, and some of the ways in which it's different is just the nature of how we are establishing that level of responsibility over all of this, and the governance models and the compliance that's necessary as we build these solutions into the way that we work. And so I kind of laid out some of the key principles that underlie this responsible AI framework. But certainly transparency is critical to establishing trust, no matter what environment that you're in. As we're making decisions that affect people and their lives and livelihoods, we need to think about fairness and inclusion. So any anyone who is a DEI advocate, I know that can be a loaded term these days. But basically, if you're a DEI advocate, then you are almost by default a responsible AI advocate and a human-centric AI advocate, because we need to make sure that everything that we do, from how these systems are designed and architected all the way to how they're used, we need to keep, you know, humans and human values and our ethics, front and center. But there's also legislation that says these are the things that we're going to do. We need to make sure that what the solution that you built and the solution that you're using is um, is auditable, that the algorithm is explainable without you actually giving away any proprietary um, information about how it works. It still needs to be explainable. You have to basically be able to justify the decisions or the output of these algorithms, because even if AI is not making a decision, which it should not, humans should be making the ultimate decision. It's still part of your decision support system, and so you need to be able to explain how it works, and you need to be transparent to your stakeholders so that they know that you are basically designing and building and deploying solutions that are trustworthy. We're going to talk about privacy and security in a little bit, but these have their own responsibility and compliance, of course, but they're part of the responsible AI framework as well. Human oversight. So we talk a lot about this phrase, human in the loop. It's a kind of a confusing, nebulous term, right? Like what's this loop that you're talking about? And it also seems like, again, it's providing just this oversight, reactive, let me see and only intervene, where something went wrong. But we have to play a more active role. And I would argue that the experienced people in your organization are the ones that should play that role. This is not for some junior person to just come in and babysit and just wait for something to go wrong and then just, raise a flag and say, oh, this broke, we need to go fix it. Someone who has the institutional knowledge of how the process is intended to work and can provide that level of not just oversight, but expertise and institutional knowledge is critical to make sure that things don't break and that things are designed the way they're supposed to be designed. And then safety and reliability. I mean, this sort of is an extension of, we were talking about, privacy and security, but really across all of these elements, these are things that can be observed, and there may be legislation that we need to adhere to. And so if you're in HR, you already have obviously a governance, risk, and compliance team, you've got a legal team. Sweeping all of this that you see here and all that we're talking about today from a responsible AI standpoint, sweeping that under those existing teams would be a mistake. There's too much at stake and there's too much to keep track of. So happy to talk to folks specifically about how to set up, AI governance, committees and AI ethics committees that have the cognitive diversity across different domains to make sure that we're thinking about this holistically across all the humans, across all the domains, across all the roles, to make sure that everything is buttoned up and we're proceeding, constructively and safely. So when we talk about human-centric AI, again, it's a little bit different than responsible AI. This isn't necessarily about regulations and legislation, which is right now, as some of you may have seen, kind of a patchwork across the U.S. and across the globe. There's different rules at a federal level. There's different rules at a municipal level. So it's kind of a mess. And the federal government has said they were going to come in and make it more streamlined, but jury's still out about exactly when and what that's going to look like. But the key for us is to hold each other accountable and to make sure that we're thinking about these things as we're designing solutions, as we are building these solutions, and of course, as we use and adopt these solutions inside organizations. The building and designing piece is important because we're all builders now, right? We're all creating AI agents. We're all thinking about how to build, these workflows. I don't work at an organization anymore, but I have plenty of workflows and processes and tasks that I need to get done. Even just for my podcast, there's a lot that goes into pre-production and post-production for the podcast, whether it's video editing or reaching out to guests and doing guest research and all these things. So I've started to expand my own, I guess, elevate my own AIQ in terms of getting comfortable, experimentation, back and forth, iterations through Claude Cowork, and Claude Code, which is a little daunting. So if you're not ready for that, that's totally fine. But I just knew that there were things that I could take off my plate, and I knew that I didn't have to have another human being necessarily do those tasks. Turns out it's a lot more difficult to do some of these things than people make it out to be. And I'm sure if your social media is like mine, it's flooded with experts, so-called experts, which we'll talk about as well. But really, this is about how do we think about all the dimensions of us as human beings and all the ways in which we contribute to society, to others, to our teams, to our organizations, to our communities, and how do we make sure that we're allowing all that human potential, all that human ingenuity, creativity, curiosity, and critical thinking to be brought to bear as we build these solutions. So I'm not going to go through all of those bullets or all of these bullets, but I wanted people to just have have an appreciation for all that we are bringing to the table for our organizations. And to me, one of the things that this highlights is just how short-sighted it is for an organization to say, we're going to just go all in with AI and we're just going to immediately, cut all these people. I think that is one of the most myopic things that an organization can do in terms of their strategy. This AI, whatever this AI strategy you think it is, it's not going to be self-executing. You're not going to have a fully autonomous, organization. And most of the organizations that have even tried to go down this path have, of course, corrected and come back to the point where some of them are even, rehiring the people that they shouldn't have let go in the first place. So you just got to, pay attention. But I want people to realize you're capable of a lot. You've got to hold the organization accountable as the employee-employer relationship is changing. Let's make sure that everyone still has, access. So this kind of leans into diversity, equity, inclusion. And of course, I include cognitive diversity and neurodiversity and all of these other things that we talk about in this picture as well. So we've got to take some cues from research that's been going on for decades and decades around human-centric design, human accessibility, and all of these things, and filter them into this big tent of human-centric AI. I want to shift gears to some of the risks. So let's talk about some of those. The first one, of course, we've talked about data privacy, and I have a personal example I'm going to share with you in a second. But data privacy is paramount. We have to understand, who has access to our data, and we should also understand when we engage with a potential vendor, how did they build their solution? What data did they access? Were they scraping, data sources that they weren't supposed to? So data is the fuel that powers all these AI models. So we have to understand, where that data came from. AI bias and fairness. Of course, we don't want AI to have its own bias, but it really doesn't have its own bias. If it's biased, that's just a mirror reflecting the human biases that went into the training data that fed the model to begin with. So let's not, necessarily blame the AI, but let's make sure that AI doesn't perpetuate and scale the bias that already exists, which is why we need responsible AI and why we need to continuously monitor this, just like we continuously monitor for data privacy, issues and breaches, and we have cybersecurity, continuously, monitored 24/7. I call out overconfidence because when we talk about hallucinations, some people don't pay attention to this concept of what a hallucination is, and they just take the AI output as authoritative, and they proceed. And that can have dangerous consequences, especially when it comes to finance or healthcare. And we've seen some horror stories about people listening to AI over actual experts and professionals. Speaking of expertise, I have a pretty funny example around everyone claiming to have AI expertise. So, just like anything that where you do your research online, just make sure that you're looking at people's, reputation and the reputation and feedback and reviews of different tools before you jump in with both feet. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I think you just got to be careful as you are scouring the landscape of who and what to trust is the bottom line. So this was an example that just came up the other day. So a lot of people, when they think about personal data, it's maybe some things that you entered, maybe there was a credit card breach or what have you. But people don't necessarily think about all the AI capabilities where it's gathering a lot more information about you in terms of your likeness. So on the left is a quick little exchange I had with someone who had terrible timing and reached out to see if I wanted them to create an AI avatar of me so that I never had to record another video again. They would basically record me for 45 minutes, my voice, my speaking style, my physical likeness, and then they could basically create unlimited videos and pump those out into different social media channels and what have you. And so you can see what my reaction was. I was immediately, skeptical. I mean, yeah, I would love to, make copies of myself and be that much more efficient and not have to spend so much time not just recording videos, but editing videos and then publishing them and things like that. It sounds great. It sounds like magic, right? But there's a lot of risks. And so just days, before this person reached out, there was this company. I mean, these startup founders look really happy. I mean, they've got a really valuable company, and yet they just lost an incredibly rich set of data that, if that shows up on the dark web, I mean, anyone can basically impersonate you. And I'm not saying, I've recorded videos. People can, download a YouTube video of me and perhaps do, something similar. But you can only control what you can control. So I would just say, just be careful about checking your settings on any of these tools that you use. Make sure your data is not being used to train models. Make sure that if you're using this at work, anything proprietary to your organization doesn't wind up in the public space where someone else using the same tools can somehow, access that information. So just, you got to be vigilant. The other thing I wanted to mention, I'm not sure if people are familiar with this Mobley case against Workday. It came up, I think, about a year ago. But basically, someone applied. I'm not going to go through the whole case, and I am certainly not a lawyer. But this person applied to hundreds of jobs that all were the employers all were using the Workday recruiting solution, and every single time his application was immediately rejected. Every single time. So whether this is conclusive or not, I think still remains to be seen, but this has now been upgraded to a collective action. I forget if it's a class action or collective action. I think it's a collective action lawsuit that basically says anyone who's over 40 who applied to jobs where they were using Workday Recruiter can be part of this lawsuit. And there's a couple of things at play here in terms of the discrimination. I'm not sure why his anxiety and depression, I'm not sure what that has to do with the age discrimination, which is the nature of the lawsuit, or the fact that he is African American. But nonetheless, there's pre-existing legislation that also feeds into this. So this doesn't necessarily go against a piece of AI legislation, but as Keith Sonderling, who's now the deputy director of the Department of Labor, but was formerly the EEOC commissioner, he used to tell people all the time, there's plenty of pre-existing legislation going back to civil rights laws in the 70s that can be brought to bear for these kinds of situations. So, we might be blaming the AI, but certainly the Workday recruiting platform predates generative AI for sure. And it doesn't necessarily fall or need a particular AI legislation for this to be problematic, or for AI to be labeled as, the reason why this is, causing such a problem. But as we'll see, talent organizations almost have no choice but to use more AI in how they're evaluating applicants, because they're getting, in some cases, thousands of applicants for a single role. So we've got to find this balance point between humans and AI as we are evaluating candidates. One of the other risks, I'm not going to go into the details. I certainly don't pay close attention to all of these different models, but my point here is simply that even your favorite, large language model or LLM based assistant will hallucinate. It's just the nature of the logic of how these models even work. They are trying to predict the next word, the next phrase. They're trying to take in context, and they don't necessarily know, right from wrong or truth from fiction. So they sound authoritative. They sound like your know-it-all best friend sometimes, or they sound like they are, have a doctor's level, knowledge of medicine and healthcare. They do not. They do not. So you just got to be careful. Check your sources. If it sounds good, maybe try putting the same question into a different AI tool and see what it tells you. But always double check your sources, especially if it's something very personal, whether it's healthcare, financial, things like that. And then I mentioned everyone's an AI expert. These two tweets, and yes, I still call them tweets. I still call it Twitter. These two tweets came in back to back in my Twitter feed. And I'm not on Twitter that much, but every once in a while I go in and somebody posts something interesting, so I'm in there. And these two tweets back to back. So which is it? Right? If they came in back to back, they can't both be the smartest AIs right now. Is it Claude or is it Gemini? And these people created these toolkits, but obviously this is a templated tweet. I see this all the time in LinkedIn now. Hey, I created this shortcut for you. Here's 50 of the best prompts. Here's this, here's that. Trust your sources, but also don't outsource your critical thinking. So it's fine if you want to take a shortcut, but make sure you're not losing anything in the process. Make sure you're not giving up your own sort of discernment, making sure that if you're submitting something that is supposed to be from your own brain, it's your original thought, original idea, an original document. Make sure that you're using it in a sort of co-pilot capacity. You can use it for the first draft, or you can use it as an editor, but the thoughts, the ideas, the stories should be from your own human brain. And that goes for things related to talent acquisition as well. So if you're a job seeker right now, it's fine to use AI to help you create a resume. Just know that people are going to be able to recognize that AI helped you create the resume, which I don't particularly have a problem with. Where I have a problem is when people try to use AI in an interview, for example. So you just got to be careful about where we're using it and what the expectations are. So it's up to the talent acquisition team to tell you their expectations in terms of where and when you can use AI in the recruiting process. But don't make assumptions. If you have questions, just ask. I know it's a tough market out there, but you still need to put your best foot forward. And I think both sides should be transparent if they want to have a healthy, hopefully long-term relationship. I'm definitely not going to go into the details on this, but one of the things I wanted to highlight here is, yes, there are absolutely jobs disappearing, and sometimes that's related to AI, sometimes it's not. Sometimes companies have wanted to make investments in AI, and the only way they claim that they can free up the investment dollars to do that is by cutting people and then hoping that they get the returns that someone predicted they can get. And that has not worked out well for a lot of companies, as I have alluded to before. Um, you need the people to do what they're best at within the organization. And if you need to redefine roles and rescope what those roles are, because AI is taking some double-digit percentage of those tasks and those responsibilities off someone's plate, then let's figure out how to redesign and rescope these roles so that you still have the knowledgeable, loyal humans, working and perhaps, training, guiding, and working with the AI solutions that you're going to implement. And then as you get that excess, capacity, as you free up people's, time and you become more efficient, then reinvest some of that, not just in AI technology, but in AI upskilling and in the workforce itself. So it's really about how you think about the reinvestment, strategy once some of these efficiency gains are achieved. Because if your organization is stopping with AI at just cost-cutting measures and efficiency, they have not even scratched the surface on where AI is going to add value. But the point here is, yes, there's a lot of jobs being displaced, but there's a lot of trusted organizations who are forecasting there's a lot of jobs that are going to be created as well. And only a certain percentage of the job displacement that says it's related to AI is actually coming from AI. So you guys will have these charts and you can look at this in more detail. There's a lot of opportunity ahead of us. I'm not going to go through all of the details, but I just wanted to have this up here to basically highlight that, yes, there's still this strange situation where people are saying they can't find good talent, even though there's tons of great talent that are getting rejected early in the recruiting cycle because you haven't figured out how best to evaluate the talent in the right way, and that is looking for the right skills and competencies, the right attitude, the right learning and growth mindset, and then layered on top of that are the competencies related to working with AI. So if you have all that institutional knowledge and experience, you have that judgment, you can bring all of that context, you can handle all these exception situations, that is irreplaceable. And AI, it's going to be a long time. I don't know if it'll be in my working lifetime where we'll see that having where those capabilities will get to that point. So we have to recognize that the way forward is humans plus AI. That is the most constructive way to think about our path along the future of work. So the skills, I mean, World Economic Forum has been talking about this for years, that the most in-demand skills, the most important skills are not these technical skills. They are not these hard skills, because those are the exact skills that AI is good at attaining itself. And so we've got to wrap ourselves around what some of those AI capabilities are and say, where are the roles and what are the human attributes that are going to be more durable? And again, going back many years, but still, I think even 2025, the top skills have not really changed. They're all related to how we deliver impact, how we create stronger relationships, how we make better decisions, and all of these elements that I need everyone to really think about how to sort of lean into those, and how does AI augment those capabilities, right? How does it help us learn in a more personalized fashion? How does it help us make a better decision by bringing not conflicting, but diverse opinions and perspectives into a decision-making exercise? How do we apply that analytical thinking, that systems thinking, to make sure that we're seeing around corners and that we're bringing all of this information to bear as we move forward? Definitely not going to go through all of this, but I just wanted to highlight, something that I see as I work with HR technology vendors and in the talent transformation space. So what we're trying to do is add intelligence to this matching. We're not having AI make any particular decisions. In fact, I'm skeptical of even some of these decisions coming up with a particular score. But if it is coming up with a score, it needs to be that needs to be audited by an independent third party. Some of those organizations I work with myself, but whether you are the vendor or the deployer of these solutions, you've got to do it in an ethical and responsible way. And your models have to be explainable. And we have to say, even when in situations where you are getting, someone just told me about a client, a CEO of one of these HR technology vendors told me he was talking to a CEO of a client, and for every application, excuse me, for every open role they had, they got between 2,000 and 3,000 applications. So both sides need to be realistic about what that means. There's no team of humans that could possibly go through in detail all of those resumes. So we need to leverage technology to help us sort through that, but we need to be careful about how it's doing that. We need to understand its logic. We need to make sure that it's putting the most weight on skills and potential. In fact, it should be obfuscating anything that would indicate someone's age, someone's ethnicity. So we should be masking their name, certainly their zip code if that appears anywhere, where they went to school, and things like that. Anything that would be an indicator, an indirect indicator of one of these protected classes. But I think it's important for us to think about this and make sure as we're applying to jobs, as we're interviewing for new roles, thinking about how we lean into this. So they may ask you about your AI fluency and how ready you are to use AI when you get on the job. They may even have some type of assessment as you're going through the recruiting process to assess your AI knowledge and your AI skills. And so as you lean into that, you also need to think about how best to position yourself with all of the experience that you bring to bear for that potential new organization. I'm looking at the clock, and I want to make sure I have time for questions. So I'm not going to go through every slide I have here. So I'm going to kind of take a fast path through the next couple of slides. But again, I want to just emphasize that humans are absolutely critical for our future of work and for us to responsibly innovate and for us to transform successfully as we navigate the path forward. So we need to be in every workflow. We need to be in every decision and every relationship. These are some of the key sort of categories of places where humans will continue to add a lot of value to organization and drive the very strategy that you're hoping to execute against. So again, you guys will have these slides, and we'll if there's questions about it, but I'll be available. But there's a lot that we bring to the table, and I don't want anyone to shortchange their own potential. The other thing, I sort of alluded to this before, but a lot of work is going to need to be redesigned. So even when people are investing in automation and building AI agents and things like that, roles will be rescoped. And so we just need to think about our role in actually helping to architect and design what that new process, what that new workflow, what that new business model might look like. So try it with a clean slate. Don't just try to iterate on your current sort of legacy processes. We need to think differently, and we need to think forward about if we reimagine everything that this company does to drive value, what would the organization look like? And then just quickly, when I talk about AIQ, don't think about it as a particular number. It's really about what does that encompass, right? And so how do you work more effectively with each other, with AI as a potential colleague, if you want to think about it that way, and how do we make sure that we're bringing all of these human elements to bear alongside of these AI skills that we need to enhance and add to our sort of toolkit, right? So you need to have that learning and growth mindset. You need to think about responsibility and human centricity by design. Again, we're going to be involved with, architecting new solutions. We're all going to start building, agents, and we need to make sure that those, whatever we build is thoroughly evaluated and tested before moving into production. And we're thinking about all the ways that things could potentially go wrong when you have these sort of free form, anyone can ask a natural language question, and who knows what people might ask or what their intentions might be. Reimagining what's possible, as I was just alluding to, think about everything that you're trying to accomplish, and then think about new ways to potentially accomplish that. But certainly, you need to understand, what tools you should learn, and the skills and proficiency that you have with those tools. But do it with intention. Do it in context. Don't just try every tool that's out there. Think about what problem you're actually trying to solve, and then figure out what is the best solution to help you solve it. So lead with the business challenge before you lead with the technology, which I would love every technology and transformation leader to be thinking about. And so these are just sort of the core literacy elements that tie into the AIQ. So yes, you need to prompt better. Some people now call it context engineering, because you need to give it more context, more information about you and what you're trying to accomplish, and other information so that it can best help you. The generic models aren't going to give you, targeted, personalized, results. So just ask better questions and continue to challenge it and prompt it, because it does not know as much as it seems to think it knows. And we talked about discernment and tool literacy. And then I'll just, leave you with this slide. Again, I'm not going to go through all of this, but I just really want the core of this is we have so much to offer, and humans are not going away, and humans are still the lifeblood of organizations. I just want people to fully appreciate what you're capable of, even if you now have to course correct and figure out a new path forward. A lateral move is not necessarily, a step backward. It's an opportunity to reset, take inventory of your transferable skills, think about what is really the type of engaging work that you want to do, and then, plan accordingly and lean into AI, let AI help sort of guide you through those career transitions. Lastly, again, you'll have these slides, but if I'll leave this up for a second, maybe I can leave this up while we're taking questions. But if you have your mobile phone available, the first QR code is a workshop that the Encore Network and I are going to run at the end of May, so right after Memorial Day, where we'll go deeper into the tools that you can take advantage of right away. So it'll be a 90-minute session. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then the other two QR codes, if you want to follow me on Substack, which I'm guessing most of you are familiar with Substack by now. And then the last one is my podcast. I am a proud member of the Work Defined Podcast Network. There's almost 90 shows on that network now, all related to work of some kind. And so definitely check that out, and then you can pivot from there to your podcast platform of choice. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Bob. There's a lot to cover.
Yeah.
We do have some questions in the chat, and I definitely want to thank you for that empowering message. I think it's important in today's, very challenging market to remember that we are of great value. Okay, I'm going to go all the way back up to the top to the first question that came in. And if we don't get to cover your questions, I apologize. We'll do our best to try to cover them possibly in the workshop. I heard Claude was an instrumental tech in targeting sites in the Iran war. Is there any way to screen AI sites for their functions and purposes?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I don't know what Claude would reveal if you asked it how it's involved in, in the, federal government. So it's probably going to be very limited, response to that, and therefore we're at the mercy of what either Anthropic or the government decides to tell us. Sometimes, as we saw with Venezuela, we found out after the fact that it was involved. But I don't know the nature of how it was involved because they are using multiple, um, what we call platform AI or frontier AI models, including OpenAI's ChatGPT as well as Anthropic's Claude, and then what's there's a big federal contractor that's also involved as well. So I'm not sure how they've architected all of that to say, okay, you do this, you do that. So I'm not sure. We'd have to. You're certainly welcome to ask Claude what it's willing to share, or maybe ask a different one and see if it gives you a different answer.
Right. Okay, another question. When you were listing out the, responsible AI elements like bias and whatnot, how do we actually uncover these elements when we're evaluating the AI tools?
Yeah, so so I encourage any organization that's deploying these in production to you can do an internal assessment and check for adverse impact and things like that. So there are ways to interrogate the data itself as well as the output of the model. So I'm happy to talk offline about how that would work, but ideally you would do that as a precursor to getting independently audited, and then some of these auditing vendors, they're checking for AI governance and AI assurance. Some frame it as. A lot of them offer continuous monitoring, so you'll know as these models may drift, right? So they're constantly learning, right? They have reinforcement learning and things like that. So the model one day might show no adverse impact or a very low adverse impact underneath the typical threshold. But a month later, it could have had new data and learned, and the model, what they call drifted, and so it's no longer in sort of compliance. And that's why it's good to continuously monitor these solutions. But there are ways to go in and see and look at adverse impact. So in the case of bias, where there's AI legislation around race, gender, things like that, if you have representative sample of those data attributes from job candidates, for example, you can go through and say, a standard measurement for adverse impact would be like this 4/5 rule. So for every 10 white or male candidates that you move to the next step, you have to have at least 8 minority candidates, or 8 female candidates, or what have you. So there's different mechanisms and ways to check for that.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. I think that's all the time we have for questions, so I apologize if we didn't get to your specific question. Please register for the workshop, and I'm sure that Bob will be available to answer questions again. I do want to say a final thank you to our sponsor again, the Dayton Foundation and the Del Mar Encore Fellows Initiative. I want to also encourage anyone who is not a member of the Encore Network to join now. We have a special promotion going on. You can get a signed copy of Ken Stern's book, Healthy to 100, along with your membership as long as supplies last. I also want to let everyone know that our next program is in 2 weeks. It's about resilience. We have Eileen I'm not going to say it right. Carasio and Jan, oh boy, Zacharitz. They are experts in the field, and they will be doing a program on resilience on Thursday, April 30th. And you can see all the programs at our website at the Encore Network, because I know we're at time. Last but not least, I do want to let you know that we have our next monthly program is on Wednesday, May 20th. Helen Hirsch Spence will be talking about what ageism has cost us. So you can see all of this on our website. And I thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Bob, for all your great insights. And I hope you'll sign up for the workshop on May 27th. Thank you so much.
Thank you.